has to be written that way. Okay? So that's an important point. There's just a lot of stuff like this that I've observed. Another person says never write little is known about. I just read a proposal today where somebody said little is known about. That's not very good. You don't have to have hypotheses. If you have them, they should emerge from the literature, and it's really good to tie them to the methods and the analysis. A really clean proposal. You can see the relationship between the literature. These hypotheses emerge from that. This is how I'm going to go about addressing those hypotheses, and this is how I'm going to determine whether I accept or reject it. You don't have to have hypotheses, but most proposals do. That's about it?
Keep going.
Keep going. Okay. I've got a lot of little pet peeves. Yeah, the whole thing about 11-point, 12-point, reviewers really don't like it when you try to sneak pages in by doing tiny type. I reviewed one where somebody had a bunch of footnotes. Footnotes are by definition really small type, and so half the proposal was really small type. It irritated everyone and they canned it. So don't try and sneak pages in. Editing. Don't let your proposal go out with spelling and grammatical errors. Have somebody check it over. I mean, I personally will give one lower grade just because something has spelling and grammatical errors. Just because most of the proposals don't. It's sloppy scholarship. So you don't want to do that. Let's see. You don't have to include everything you're going to do. So you may have some grand scheme of what you're going to do, but you just want to get funded for a piece of the project. If you try to put too much into a 10-page proposal, it won't make any sense. So cleave off a piece of it that you can really do a good job of explaining, and leave the rest of it out. They don't care. Let's see. The budget, the money stuff, my experience is that I would go ahead and ask for the full amount, which is, I think, essentially what you were saying, unless you're going to ask for a lot less. So nobody really ever raises the budget as an issue unless it's a little amount of money, and that's only when they're wavering on whether to fund it. If the science is good, nobody's going to care about the budget at all. The program officer will at the end, but it never comes up with the panel. But I have been in circumstances where people say, well, we're really not sure about this. Well, she's only asking for $5,000, or he only wants $7,000, whatever. So it can come up in those circumstances. Methodologically, saying that you're going to use a particular software program or citing a big methods text isn't the methods section. So you really do need to say exactly what you're going to do, and you would do well to tie it directly to particular analyses. Go ahead. Stop.
Very good.
All right.
Can I pull up your?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Your talking points. So I read through Chris's talking points and sort of, filled in stuff, or sometimes his points would make you think of something, and mine are proposals get assigned is that there's always a primary panel member, a primary reviewer, whose expertise is most closely aligned with yours, and then a secondary, and then sometimes there might be a third reviewer, or sometimes that person's just a scribe who actually takes notes during the panel discussion. So the primary reviewer will present the proposal to the entire panel and basically do most of the talking, and then the secondary reviewer will chime in, if they disagree or if they have extra points. A lot of it depends on the personality of the panel member, how talkative they are. My experience is that, like I said, the panel really wants to fund as many proposals as possible, but the reality is that they can't fund all the good ones. It was particularly frustrating when I sat on the DDI proposal, on the DDI panel, because we had a lot of really good proposals, and we knew we weren't going to be able to fund them all. So it was actually quite frustrating from the panel's perspective to not be able to fund as much science as we thought was really deserving of funding. What that means is that if there's something wrong with the proposal, if there's something unclear, that they will most likely throw it into the revise and resubmit. This gives you a chance to address those reviewers' concerns, and also gives the panel a chance to focus on, well, these proposals really we have no questions, no doubts about, but this other one, we've got a couple questions on. Chris's point about typos and all of that is important, and you might think, well, it's just a couple typos. What it reflects is that if you don't have the attention to detail to put together a DDI proposal, can the panel be certain that you have the attention to detail to pull off the research? So it directly reflects the mindset that the panel thinks you're going to go into the research with.
Should I scroll down?
Yeah, I think everything else has been covered there. Oh, in terms of co-reviewing. So co-reviewing can be kind of interesting. Different programs play well with each other, that they like to co-review. Other programs like never co-review. So you can request something be co-reviewed, like Chris said. The first program that you list is the panel that it will be submitted to. But you can request it be co-reviewed. Before you do something like that, you ought to talk to the program director of the primary program and find out if they're likely to co-review or actually likely to co-fund a proposal with another program. Because if they've never done it before, it means they're unlikely to do it with you, so you're wasting your time asking this other program to co-review it. Physical anthropology and archaeology constantly co-review and co-fund projects. Physical anthropology and cultural anthropology to a lesser extent, but they still play well with each other. And we get back to that if two programs co-fund a proposal, they both get to claim that they funded another proposal. Like I said, the panels really want to fund research. So in some ways, they actually like to be able to co-review and co-fund proposals, but you need to make sure that if you're proposing, if you're suggesting actually a co-review, that it's a good match. Now, sometimes the program director will send it out to co-review unbeknownst to you. And if you haven't written for that audience, then it probably will not work, because you have to know your audience. So I have a friend who submitted to systematics, and because he was studying Neanderthals, it got co-reviewed by physical anthropology, and phys anthro hated it because it didn't have the right lingo. I mean, he wasn't at all in that space of looking at Neanderthals. When he resubmitted it, and he knew it was going to be co-reviewed by physical anthro, and he wrote it appropriately, then it got funded. All right, in terms of developing and writing your proposal, so you want to make sure that before you start writing, you can actually do the research. You can't start too early. You really have to be, ready to hit the ground running. The only thing holding you back is this lack of funding. So make sure you have a fully thought out, fully developed, completely feasible project before you start writing. Because, so one of the death knells in a proposal is to be called too ambitious, or maybe just ambitious. And this is, another unfortunate reality. NSF is a federal agency. That, by definition, they're conservative. They want to fund research that can be done. They don't want to fund research that might be done. They want to know, and particularly at your level, where you're just students, they want to know that you can do it. So you need to propose. So you need to show that this research is feasible, and that you can do it, and that you've thought it all out. So one thing, I actually like to see supporting letters in a proposal. Now, I don't mean letters of recommendation. I mean letters that say, this person wants to do field work in Botswana. some of the difficulties and the logistics involved. So if you can have people who write letters that will attest to, that you have permission to collect samples or permission to go into a country, or if you require, additional assistance with the methods or with the statistical analysis, if you can get people to write letters to say, yes, I've read the proposal, I'm really going to assist them with this analysis. As a reviewer and as a panel member, I really like to see that, because that means to me, you've got buy-in from these people who you need to make your proposal successful. All right, broader impacts. So broader impacts have become more and more important at NSF. It used to be, something that was largely ignored. Now you're told that you actually have to have separate intellectual merit and broader impact sections in the summary. It makes it easier for the reviewers and the panel members, just like underlining the important sentences. Different programs consider broader impacts differently. I consider broader impacts that they can either be intellectual or more outreach based. So when I say intellectual, I mean it's a way in which your research will impact outside the direct focus of your research. So it's kind of a fine line, but say I'm working on questions of colonization by humans in the New World. So my whole proposal is going to be talking about that. But in reality, maybe some of my results will have relevance for colonization processes in general, other geographic regions, maybe humans and non-humans. So you're not actually going to spend part of your proposal talking about all of that, but you want to bring it up in the broader impact that this research has relevance outside of what I'm doing. Because by far the most common flaw I saw in DDI proposals was that students couldn't step out of the mindset that their research was just the most important thing going. I mean, it's important for you to think your research is the most important thing going, but nobody else is going to. And as you mature as a researcher and scholar, it's important for you to be able to tell people why your research is relevant to other programs, other projects, other people. Why it should be important to them, because it's not just about colonization of the New World. It has all of these other impacts and relevancies. So I see that as sort of an intellectual aspect of broader impacts. And then there's the more outreach-based components to broader impacts, which in anthropology can be fairly easy to get some broader impacts. You do a molecular genetics workshop in Yemen because you're collecting samples in Yemen, or you can spin off stuff like that fairly easily. But if you're in a program or in a field where it's not so obvious, it's pretty much like So said. You have to think of something, all right? Because they absolutely will not fund your proposal if the only thing it has going for it is that it will answer the research questions you're specifically interested in, and it'll give you a PhD. You have to be able to think broader than that. Let's see. If I got a couple more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of writing it, so this is sort of general writing advice, whether it's a proposal or a paper, because I find myself saying the same things over and over again to my students. One thing you don't want to be is redundant. All right, it gets back to what Chris was saying. You don't want to tick the reviewer off. So if you're saying something over and over again, the reviewer's going to say, got it already. If you find yourself saying something over and over again and you can't think of how to not say it, it means your proposal's organized bad. Because you ought to be able to write the proposal in a way that doesn't require you to say something 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So you should sort of be aware of that. If you're thinking, wow, I just said this, and particularly if you just said it in the previous paragraph, you've got to reorganize. And in general, if you find you're really struggling to make something work, to make something right, to make a paragraph hang together, and it's just not coming, it's probably not going to happen. It's probably badly organized, and that's why it's not coming. So you need to start fresh. Another thing, it sort of gets into Chris's point about, talking about gaps or lacuna. The idea is that your philosophy might be that you're thinking the way to justify this research is to say, well, this has never been done. Nothing like never to your advantage. So you want to be careful not to be too negative in your writing. You are not going to build a successful proposal by tearing down, you know, aspects of the field or research that's been done before. Even if it's true, you don't want to put it painted in a negative light. Paint it either positively, you know, I'm going to build on this research that has, you know, that I can, you know, expand on, you know, if you don't want to say something like fill holes or something like that. So either spin it positive or at least keep it neutral if you can't find your way to that positive note. I would definitely send it out to lots of people, all right? Not just your committee members, not even just people at UF. You can use this as a networking opportunity, right? Find people at other universities who maybe you've heard them speak at conferences and you wanted to get to know them. You know, send them an email with your proposal, you know, a nice, briefly, concisely worded email where you say you've got this proposal, you would appreciate their expertise in thus, and thus, you know, because you've written your proposal that you know, builds on their expertise. Go on and tell them why you've chosen them. And if there's some particular aspect of the grant proposal that you'd like them to look at, be as specific but still concise as you can. And, you know, the worst that can happen is that they'll say no or they'll ignore your email, which you can surely, you know, weather. I would give yourself a month for that period. You've got to give someone, especially if you're really cold calling these people, you've got to give them at least 2 weeks to review your proposal. And you've then got to give yourself time to respond to those criticisms. Don't insult them by getting their reviews back the day before the proposal is due, because they know you're not going to do anything with their, you know, comments. And then you've just wasted their time. And if they're at all familiar with NSF deadlines, they'll know that. So then give yourself another 2 weeks to revise based on their comments. And I guess the last thing I'll say is that if you get a decline, I would probably recommend not to resubmit unless you talk to the program officer and they say it's okay to resubmit. Because the panels I've sat on, when we say decline, that's what we mean. We are sending a very strong message that we don't want to see this proposal again. It generally has been submitted numerous times, and either the researcher hasn't responded to the criticisms, but they've kind of ticked the panel off and they don't want to see it again unless it's completely transformed into something